How did this history get lost? And of course the answer was it wasn't lost, it was intentionally ignored, it was intentionally dropped. We didn't want you to know that there was this thriving civilization that put lamps up that were powered by petroleum 1,000 years ago, and were doing cataract surgery 1,000 years ago, while Europeans were living in little towns like Paris, where the streets were literally their sewage system. Right? And they would just throw the fecal matter and urine out the window, and it would flow in the rain into the wells, which is why they couldn't drink their water, because you'd just die of cholera and dysentery instantaneously if you did, which meant that during that time period, Europeans could only drink beer and wine, and so they were constantly drunk. But it's okay, they smelled like fecal matter and urine, so it was a way to compensate, I think. That, and they had to wear wool, so they were always walking around itching. And so you smelled like poop and piss, and you're itching, so you might as well be drunk.
The narrative of history is a powerful tool that shapes our understanding and our place within. However, when it comes to African history, many people truly believe this is not due to a lack of historical significance, but rather a deliberate erasure of Black contributions from the global historical narrative. This erasure is a result of centuries of European control over information in discourse, a process that began in earnest in 1492 with the advent of Welcome to Africarized, where you find everything about Africa, from history, Black history, stories, and life. I am Kelvin. This video is brought to you by Fitness Lifestyle, an independent herbalife distributor dedicated to helping you achieve your wellness goals. Whether you are managing diabetes, depression, hair loss, or weight concerns, our premium nutritional products are designed to support your gym. Click the link below to order and experience transformative collaborative financial freedom. Unlock a flexible business opportunity that lets you work on your terms. Join our team today. Click the link to enroll and start building your future. The year 1492 marked a turning point in global history. 𝒂𝒓𝒂𝒏𝒊𝒔 voyage to the Americas set the stage for Europe's rise to power. Over the subsequent years, European nations embarked on a campaign of conquest, colonization, and enslavement. This dominance allowed Europe to control not only the territories, but also the narrative of history. Europe's control over historical information is twofold: direct control over the dissemination of information and the shaping of the discourse around it. By controlling what is taught in schools, colleges, and universities, what books are taught in bookshops, and what documentaries are produced, Europe has been able to present itself as the centerpiece of world history, culture, and civilization. This monopoly has effectively marginalized the contributions of Black people and other indigenous populations. The erasure of African history is not a systematic effort to maintain European hegemony. By controlling the narrative, Europe has been able to downplay the significance of African civilizations and their contributions to global development. For instance, the ancient Egyptians are often depicted in Western media and academia as a separate entity from the rest of Africa, thereby diminishing the historical achievement. Moreover, the destruction of African written records during colonial rule has further exacerbated this erasure. The burning of libraries such as the Library of Alexandria and the looting of artifacts have left significant gaps in the historical record. This has made it easier for Europe to write its version of African history, often portraying the continent as primitive and in need of European intervention. Celebrate African heritage with Africarized. Explore our collection of African-inspired apparel, home decor, and accessories. Wear pride, embrace culture, and support creativity. Shop now using the link below. One of the most insidious ways Europe has maintained control over historical narratives is by discrediting scholars who tell the truth about African history. For example, the Greek writers who documented the Black identity of the ancient Egyptians been dismissed as unreliable. Similarly, Lady Laga's book, A Tropical Dependence, which detailed the West African empire of Songhai, has been largely ignored and discredited. This strategy of discrediting truth tellers serves two purposes. It undermines the credibility of alternative narrative and reinforces the dominant European perspective. By controlling a legitimate historian, Europe has been able to shape the discourse around African history to suit its interests. In the age of postmodernism, the goalposts of historical evidence have shifted, whereas once the presence of written records was considered sufficient evidence, now every source is subject to scrutiny and skepticism. This shift has disproportionately affected African history, which has fewer surviving records due to colonial destruction. Europe, with its vast archives, can afford to discard half of its records and still maintain a coherent historical narrative. In contrast, African history, with its sparser record, cannot withstand such scrutiny. This double standard allows Europe to continue to dominate the historical discourse, even as it purports to embrace a more critical approach to history. The control of historical narratives has profound implications for global perceptions of Africa and its people. By presenting Africa as a continent lacking historical significance, Europe has justified its colonial and neo-colonial interventions. This narrative has also contributed to systematic racism and discrimination faced by Black people worldwide. Moreover, the erasure of African history has psychological and cultural consequences for Africans themselves. It can lead to a sense of disconnection from one's heritage and an internalization of the inferiority complex imposed by colonial narratives. This, in turn, can hinder efforts towards the cultural preservation and development. To resist the erasure of African history, it is crucial to support initiatives that promote African scholarship and cultural preservation. This includes funding research into African history, supporting African museums and archives, and advocating for the inclusion of African perspectives in global historical narrative. Additionally, it is essential to challenge the dominant European narratives and demand a more inclusive and accurate portrayal of history. This can be achieved through education, media, and advocacy efforts that highlight the contributions of African civilizations and their impact on global development. To control the historical narrative is a powerful tool that has been wielded by Europe to maintain its dominance and justify its action. By erasing African history and discrediting truth tellers, Europe has shaped global perception and reinforced its position at the center of world history. However, by resisting this erasure and reclaiming African history, we can work toward a more inclusive and accurate understanding of our shared past. The narrative of history is not set in stone. It is a dynamic and contested field. By challenging dominant narratives and advocating for a more inclusive perspective, we can redress the imbalances of the past and build a more equitable future. The reclamation of African history is not just a matter of historical accuracy, but also a crucial step toward cultural preservation, psychological empowerment, and global justice. Share your thoughts on this subject in the comments. I'll be delighted to read and learn from you as well. Share this video and subscribe to Africarized for more insightful content about Africa. This is 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒆 signing out. Stay inspired, stay Africarized. Peace.